After that, we're going to have our social leader joining us live from Mexico, Pedro Ucbe. Now we're going to go with Pedro. Pedro Ucbe is a Maya social leader in Mexico, and he's going to be telling us his story and his struggle against these mega projects that Francisco just talked about. I'm going to explain you how the translation or interpretation is going to work. As you can see in the slides, you have in the bottom of the chat a small circle. It says interpretation, yes. If you want to listen in Spanish, what Pedro is saying, yes, what Pedro is saying, you have to click on Spanish. If you don't speak Spanish and you want to listen to the interpreter, then click on English.
Yeah.
Yes. So, is Pedro ready?
No, yeah.
Okay. Bienvenido y muchas gracias otra vez por estar con nosotros.
Buenos días. Mi nombre es Pedro Ucbe. Soy indígena maya y vivo aquí en la península de Yucatán, México.
I live in the peninsula Yucatan in Mexico. I come from a monolingual family that speaks Maya. So I learned from very young to work the land together with my father. I was a peasant since I was small until I was 18. And I learned to live in the surroundings and create and recreate life.
Un sentimiento de cariño.
Mayans have a sense of respect and tenderness towards the environment in which we grow up. And it has to do with the forest, with the cenotes and the water, with the birds, with the animals. And with everything that surrounds us and form part of our lives, like the rain, the wind, the corn, and the work that we do in the forest or on the land. So our native language is the Maya language. And we don't only learn to live together, but also to honor our lives together. Together with the trees, with the land, with the rain. And the Mayan culture has been characterized by being integrated with nature. As Mayans, we don't see the nature as something separated from us, as something that we need to domesticate. We see nature as something that is part of our lives. We think that if the water is sickened or contaminated, we will also get sick. We think that if they cut down the trees, they are cutting off our hands and feet. We think that if the wind will be contaminated, we will inspire death.
Nuestra organización.
So we're trying to make our organization grow in this little corner of the country. where we live as the Mayan people. And this is why when some years ago, the so-called developing companies started arriving and they started to occupy thousands of hectares of land, and they started to contaminate the water, and they started to make the air rotten, and they started to foment conflict and insecurity and to promote violence. As Mayan people, this was horrifying to us. And we started to see that the land where we had been living and where we continue to live
y representa una amenaza para nuestra vida.
Is a victim of violence, and this represents a threat to our lives. Every time we see the trees cut down, every time we see the water contaminated.
A raíz de estas empresas grandes en complicidad con el Estado mexicano, comenzaron.
Since these companies are acting in complicity with the Mexican government, they are fomenting what they call development.
Como un beneficio para nosotros los indígenas.
But these projects that were announced as beneficial to us, the indigenous peoples, we have seen that it's the other way around. And that this is just a discourse, a speech they are giving us.
Deforestación, lo que se ha desarrollado.
Because what in reality they have contributed to is deforestation, contamination of the water, and dispossessing us and driving us out of our territories. So from being the Mayan people, we have become strangers in our own land. For example, the monoculture of transgenic soybeans has been very harmful for us. There are some 220 farms with pigs on top of the cenotes. And this is contaminating the water and the air. And it's the same with the soybeans.
Que permanecieran, sino mata también las abejas y muchos insectos y pájaros que son importantes.
Because the poison they are spraying out is not only killing the weeds, it's killing all kinds of plants in this place where we live. And we think that if they are killing the pollinators, this is a problem. And they have taken our lands from us through manipulation and false information. For example, through the construction of windmill parks. And the construction and production of this kind of energy is not clean from what we have seen. And the contracts are not good because our Spanish is not perfect. And so we only receive the leftovers in the agreements that they make with us. So they come to hit us and to destroy our environment. This is also the case for the companies that come to construct infrastructure and houses for what they call tourism. It has taken our territories from us because there are attractive landscapes, such as the cenotes, such as the forests and the jungles and the archaeological sites.
Que los mayas del pasado
and the
hicieron.
old constructions that the Mayans of the past made.
Que tiene que ver con espacios en donde nosotros hemos aprendido a hacer nuestra propia vida. Otro de
So they are
proyectos que ha venido a
invading the spaces where we have learned to organize our lives.
completar este despojo es el que está promovido por el mismo presidente de la República.
This displacement is also promoted by the President of the Republic, who is promoting a project which is erroneously called the Mayan train. But this is not a project that was suggested by the Mayan people. It doesn't have anything Maya to do with it. This train is taking not just the lands from us, but even our name. So what the government and the companies are trying to do is to convert the Mayan people into train wagons.
Lo que está convirtiendo este gobierno en un proceso de deforestación.
It brings with it a process of deforestation and attacks on our culture and language and our environment, on the water and on everything that we know as that which gives us life. So based on these projects that I'm mentioning, as indigenous Mayans of the Yucatan Peninsula, we have decided to come together and to organize around these things that worry us.
En una asamblea.
And we're organizing ourselves in an assembly.
Asamblea de Defensores del Territorio Maya, Much
It's
Shimbal.
called an Assembly of the Defenders of the Mayan Territory. And we met on the 13th of January in 2018.
Personas que venimos de al menos 25 comunidades de la península de Yucatán, que son tres estados.
There was presence of at least 25 communities from 3 states here in Mexico: Campeche, Quintana Roo, and Yucatan. And these communities are what conforms the Mayan people here in Mexico.
En esta asamblea, nosotros nos propusimos un objetivo que es la de
In this
defender
assembly, we set ourselves a goal, which is to defend our territory from invasions, from the large companies.
es poner esta consigna que dice: la tierra ni se vende ni se renta,
And
porque la
we
tierra
made a motto
es la propia madre.
which says the land is not for sale nor for rent, because this is our Mother Earth. When the political parties are allies of the large companies that are displacing us, which is what we see now with a government that has not sufficiently attended to the issue of health, but has used grand quantities of money to promote this project, which is badly named the Mayan train. So we have filed cases with the judicial system, but we see that these cases are not advancing as they should, or as the law would suggest.
Concedido como hemos reclamado, violando nuestros derechos que están consagrados en la Constitución y que
These
también
cases have not been able to secure our constitutional rights and our international human rights, such as those in the ILO Convention 169 on Indigenous and Tribal People's Rights.
Nuestro dolor, nuestra razón, nuestra visión como pueblo indígena, y el gobierno simplemente no ha querido oír, no ha querido ver.
They are not respecting our vision as indigenous peoples, and they don't want to hear the realities that we put forward, because this is what we experience. So we are victims of discrimination and marginalization for our way of life, for our language, for the color of our skin, and for the way in which we organize ourselves. They only see development from their point of view and their way of being. But we believe that the people who grow up in a city, they don't feel the same tenderness towards the forest, towards the animals, because they haven't grown up and they haven't known this form of life that we have. So we have this love for our environment, and we're not defending the forest because it makes us rich to do so. We do it because it means life to us. We think that if they finish off our territory and our environment, they also finish our life. So it's a way of exterminating us, to exterminate our surroundings. It's as if in a swimming pool, if you open in the bottom so that little by little the water can seep out, in the end there will be nothing left. And this is what they're doing to us. They're destroying our forests so that little by little they can kill us. So we say it's hypocrisy when they talk about creating jobs for the Mayans. We are not talking about the need for jobs as the prime issue. We have work. We're asking for them to not take the land that we work from us and turn us into ill-paid workers and slaves.
a convivir de esta manera toda vez que
And we think that we have the right to demand,
se ha declarado un país pluriétnico,
because officially this country has declared itself to be multi-ethnical and multicultural.
habla de cuáles son nuestros derechos.
The Constitution is talking about our rights and the responsibilities that the state has towards us.
Al igual que los anteriores,
But this government, just like the former ones,
estos derechos y nos han avasallado y nos han arrebatado
has not
que nos queda
respected these rights, and they are taking
a morir.
what little is left from us.
Queremos manifestar al mundo
So we want to manifest to the world
conformidad y
our pain and our inconformity and our struggle.
subrayar que nuestra lucha
We also want to underline
la búsqueda del poder con algún partido político,
that we are not looking for power through some political party.
presidente para poner a
We are not
no estamos
trying to replace the president for another one.
lo que estamos haciendo es hablar con la voz de la tierra,
We're trying to speak
del agua,
with the voice of the land and the water and the birds and the animals,
de la lluvia, hablar con
with the voice of the rain, the voice of the corn,
es lo que estamos haciendo
that is us.
porque creemos en la vida.
This is what we do because we believe in life.
Aprendido a cultivar en esta
This
vida
life that has taught us
que tiene características
how to grow crops and how to live in peace
alegría, que tiene
and in happiness
convivencia y sobre todo
and
al
togetherness
medio ambiente. Esa es nuestra lucha y es la que queremos
and love for the environment.
Agradecemos que se tomen este tiempo para escuchar esta versión nuestra
That's what we do, and we're grateful that you have taken the time to listen to our version.
y es nuestra verdad y
This is the truth
palabra
from us, the Mayans here in the Yucatan Peninsula.
con ustedes. Muchas
And this is what we're communicating to you. Thank you very much.
No hay en este momento enfrentamientos físicos, pero sí enfrentamiento legal. Tenemos alrededor de 15 amparos que pusimos en contra del tren, de los cuales 4 han sido exitosos y nos han concedido una suspensión temporal y una suspensión definitiva. Sin embargo, el gobierno sigue construyendo. Sí.
Perdón, pausa para que Jimena pueda condensar lo que estás diciendo y comunicarlo. Gracias.
So Pedro is saying that there aren't physical confrontations between both parties, but there are legal confrontations. They have put up 15 protection petitions until now, and 4 of them have resulted in a positive way. Pedro, ¿puedes seguir?
Sí, gracias. El gobierno sigue construyendo a pesar de los amparos, porque dice que no está construyendo, sino está rehabilitando una vía que existe desde hace muchos años.
The government has continued, however, constructing in spite of the petitions that have succeeded, because they are claiming that they are repairing the places that the construction is keeping on happening.
Lo cierto es que este gobierno no ha querido hacer caso a lo que nosotros hemos manifestado, y todas las prácticas que se han desarrollado en torno al proyecto son tramposas, como las consultas indígenas.
The feeling that the Mayan people have really is that the government doesn't listen to what they have to say or their positions, and tools such as the consultation, like previous consultation tools, are not being used adequately.
De acuerdo a las normas establecidas para la consulta, deben ser previas, libres, informadas, culturalmente adecuadas y de buena fe, y todas han sido violentadas.
So the principle under which a previous consultation with indigenous people are kind of cemented, or the basis of this, is that they are previous to the start of the project, that they are free so that people are not coerced into any voting, that they are informed so that people have the enough amount of information about the project as to choose, and upon goodwill, which Mayan people don't experience.
Frente a un gobierno con características autoritarias, mucha gente ha decidido no salir a las calles para no encontrar los golpes de la policía.
Even though many of the Mayan people would like to go out and protest more physically these actions by the government, they fear the police retaliation because they perceive the government as an authoritarian government at the moment.
Muchas gracias. Espero haber contestado.
He thanks you for the question.
Muchísimas gracias, Pedro, y gracias, Jimena. Thank you very much, Pedro and Jimena. We continue with the next question because I think you already addressed Mede's second question, so we'll continue with Charlotte. Charlotte is asking how we might be able to exchange experiences with one another or with people who are in similar situations. According to her opinion, it is very necessary to connect or create bonds between groups that experience oppression. For example, those that live in Mexico working against mega-projects, and those that work or fight fracking in Colombia, Argentina, and Mozambique. So I'll just translate into Spanish. Charlotte está preguntando cómo podemos compartir experiencias entre personas que están en la misma situación. En su opinión, es necesario hacer o facilitar relaciones entre grupos que están marginalizados. Por ejemplo, los que están en México luchando contra los megaproyectos y los que están trabajando en contra del fracking, extracción de gas en Colombia, Argentina y Mozambique.
Sí, gracias. Es un reto para los que estamos enfrente de una lucha el buscar siempre las alianzas por varias razones, entre ellas los mecanismos, las distancias y los modos de comunicarnos, pero además el encontrarnos.
He says that it's a challenge for the people leading those movements to establish alliances because of many reasons, because of communication barriers, because of distance, because of the difference in how different projects work in different places.
Sin embargo, creemos que es válido hacer esfuerzos como en este caso que en este espacio nos podemos conocer. Por ejemplo, yo no conocía a Doris y hoy la encuentro en este espacio y tal vez es una manera de aprovechar estos espacios para encontrarnos y poner en común nuestras luchas.
He believes, though, in the importance of people getting together to fight together. And he is, for example, very glad to have met Doris today in this event because he didn't know her before. So he thinks events like this, where people can connect like across countries or across regions, but with the same cause, are very valuable opportunities.
Otra herramienta que hemos usado son las redes y el Internet propiamente, y hemos creado una página, un blog el mismo Twitter o el mismo Facebook para compartir nuestra lucha, y hemos encontrado a muchos en este camino y nos hemos aprendido a acompañar.
He's saying that according to their association's experience using social media and blogs and Twitter, Facebook, all these sorts of online meeting places are good places to meet others in the same cause and start collaboration.
Sin embargo, sigue siendo un reto hacer una red consolidada de luchas que nos permita tener la fuerza suficiente para parar estos megaproyectos que nos han venido a dañar en nuestra vida y en nuestro medio ambiente.
He still thinks that even though there are more possibilities of meeting people that are fighting for the same causes, it is still difficult to establish an effective collaboration with them that would help them be united in the fight for their rights.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you both. We continue with a question from Ida in the chat that was posed in English, so I'll just read it again in 2 languages. So first in English, do you think, Pedro, that there's been an actual change as regards to the government involving indigenous people in the project after there's been brought more attention to the problem? Ya, Pedro, lo voy a decir en español. ¿Usted piensa que había un cambio en la manera de hacer el gobierno de México en incluir los grupos indígenas en los megaproyectos, ya que el mundo se ha prestado más atención a ese problema?
Sí, muchas gracias. El tema consiste en un cambio de narrativa, en un cambio de discurso. Hay un discurso distinto, eso es cierto, pero la práctica no ha sido muy distinta a los otros gobiernos de los sexenios pasados, encabezados por los partidos mayoritarios que han sido el PRI y el PAN. Este gobierno declaró la muerte del neoliberalismo, pero en la práctica sigue haciendo igual que los anteriores, por lo menos en materia indígena.
He experiences that even though this new government has a different, like it comes with a different discourse than the traditional parties, which are the PRI and the PAN, still the actions of the government, especially towards indigenous people, are still the same. So it doesn't matter in a way for the indigenous people that the government claims to have ended neoliberalism in Mexico, because this is not what they are experiencing.
Hay una práctica que se ha mostrado mucho por conveniencia política, que es el indio folclorizado, el maya del folclore, el impulso a los museos, el indio muerto, el indio que se puede ver desde una vitrina. Pero los indios no permitidos somos los que seguimos luchando por nuestro territorio. Y esto empezó desde que el presidente tomó posición con el recibimiento del bastón de mando, que políticamente le atrajo una buena mirada desde otros países.
He's saying 2 things. So first, I'm going to address the last thing he said, is that when the current president of Mexico took possession of his presidency, he received an indigenous staff, like a symbol of the indigenous cause, and this gave him a good reputation abroad, but the indigenous people don't experience that he actually is paying attention to them. So this takes me to the first thing he said, which is that he thinks that the indigenous people are very often represented as folklore, as something you can see in a museum, as this specific people that dance in a certain way, or have this specific things that make them almost like museum things. But he says that the indigenous that are not like this, that are like him and that are fighting for their territory, are not so well received by the mainstream population.
Es por eso que nos parece de mucho valor estos espacios que pueden abrirse para las voces que estamos desde abajo, desde esta trinchera, porque la narrativa oficial lo que ha hecho es descalificarnos y acusarnos de radicales, de conservadores, y con ese emblema de las conferencias mañaneras que hoy se ha puesto tan de moda para descalificar a cualquiera, el yo tengo otros datos. Los datos del presidente son los datos de la verdad sobre cualquier otra verdad.
He thinks that this kind of events are very important because here he can get a voice and his community can get a voice to express their position, which is something that they are normally not able to do for the official public in Mexico, for example, because there what prevails is the official narrative that the authorities have, which is that of the indigenous people that are not like that are against these mega projects, are radicals, are conservatives. And one thing that Pedro says worries him is that the government always presents some data that is not the data that the indigenous people agree with. So there is also that difference of that the government thinks that they have some neutral data that is not what the indigenous people recognize.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias a ti, Pedro. Bueno, aquí hay otra pregunta. Primero la voy a leer en inglés para que el resto de la gente entienda, ¿vale? ADG asks, I have recently read that the government of Mexico has ordered the prohibition of glyphosate in a progressive manner for the year 2024. Is this true? I hope that the region of Yucatan is included in this plan. What are your reactions? What are your thoughts regarding this issue? Pero la pregunta es, hace poco leí la noticia que el gobierno mexicano ordenó la prohibición del glifosato de manera progresiva para el año 2024. ¿Es esto cierto? Espero que la zona de Yucatán esté dentro del plan. ¿Qué reacciones tienes al respecto?
Así es, muchas gracias. Es cierto, en parte, y también es una media verdad, porque el presidente pues termina su periodo en el 2024. Entonces, la orden que hace respecto a los transgénicos es que las empresas la pueden seguir usando y el gobierno o las oficinas del Estado la van a ir disminuyendo hasta el 2024 o 23. Es decir, faltando un año o el año que termine su gobierno, entonces se comienza a aplicar plenamente esa ley. Es una trampa desde nuestro punto de vista. Es como dejarle al otro gobierno la responsabilidad de algo que él debería hacer.
Pedro is saying it more as a trap, because the president, that is the current president, ends his mandate in 2024. And what this means is that glyphosate can still be used, but it will be just diminished gradually until the end of his government. But he's not completely making it down to zero. So he sees it as a trap that kind of postpones dealing with the issue for the next.
Por eso nosotros creemos que es una trampa debido a que los transgénicos no solamente se han mantenido los que estaban desde cuando él llega al gobierno, sino se han aumentado en cantidad, y esto fue parte del conflicto interno que hubo entre dos secretarios de Estado, entre el secretario de la Semarnat y el secretario de Agricultura, que es el que promueve las semillas transgénicas. Villalobos, que el secretario de Agricultura, fue el que hizo la ley Monsanto y ha promovido todo el paquete o el kit que le llaman de las semillas transgénicas promovido por Monsanto, y es uno de los secretarios más importantes del Estado.
He is emphasizing that they think it's a trap because GMOs and glyphosate, the use of them has actually augmented in the past years. And two top people in the government are kind of having a fight, and one of them represents this will of diminishing the use of them, and the other one is actually representing big companies like Monsanto and kind of trying to foster the use of GMOs anyway. So he thinks it's a trap. He thinks it's for the media only.
Aquí en mi zona, a 70 kilómetros de donde vivo, está uno de los plantíos de más de 5,000 hectáreas de Alfonso Romo, el que fuera el jefe de la oficina de la Presidencia de la República, y en este lugar encontró algunos cenotes y los rellenó de escombros para convertirlo en un plantío de soya.
He's saying that, for example, about 70 kilometers away from his home, where he is right now, there is a big farm of 5,000 hectares that belongs to a top person in the government, where he found cenotes, which are these underground caves, water that we saw. And what he has done is to fill these cenotes with soil so that he can start a big monoculture plantation of soybeans.
Nunca ha habido castigo, a pesar de que la ley lo menciona, nunca ha habido castigo para esta persona, toda vez que el presidente siempre tiene otros datos.
Even though many people in the community have denounced this, that this person is covering the cenotes, which are protected areas, the government does not take action because Pedro says that the government often claims that the data they have and the studies they've done are different than what the indigenous people claim.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
We have another question for Pedro. Pedro, tenemos otra pregunta para ti. In El Salvador, Julie asks, in El Salvador, the socialist government managed to have gold mining totally prohibited by law. Is this something that you think could serve as inspiration in the struggle against extractive mining in Mexico? Voy a leerla en español para ti, Pedro. En El Salvador, el gobierno socialista logró prohibir por ley la minería de oro. ¿Es esto algo que te puede servir de inspiración en tu lucha contra el modelo extractivista de minería que existe en México?
Sí, muchas gracias. Pues bueno, nosotros pensamos que todos los megaproyectos que van en detrimento de nuestro territorio debería por lo menos estudiarse de nuevo y someterlo a una discusión franca, abierta, libre con las comunidades para que juntos podamos buscar una solución. Lo que nos llama la atención o lo que no nos gusta es que nos sigan tratando a los indígenas como menores de edad y todo lo tengan que decidir los no indígenas que tienen el poder.
Sorry, Pedro. What he's thinking is that all the mega projects should at least be discussed in an honest and open manner with the communities where they're going to be implemented. Pedro feels that indigenous people are often treated as underaged people or as less capable people. So he really wants the government to just to recognize the agency that they have when these projects are happening in their own territories.
Y ojalá que los gobiernos de cualquier orientación ideológica, porque al parecer de izquierda o de derecha nosotros ya no entendemos realmente quién es quién. Hemos visto que la izquierda está en el fondo de la derecha y viceversa. Entonces, no vamos a discutir nosotros eso. Nosotros lo que vamos a querer es que nos respeten como un país pluriétnico, plurinacional, pluricultural, como lo marca la Constitución y los acuerdos internacionales.
There is a big discussion between people that belong to the left-wing politics and the right-wing politics. And Pedro is saying that indigenous people are not in this discussion at all. They are just trying to claim their rights as an ethnic group that is within a multi-ethnic country. So they just want to be taken into account and respected and asked before these projects happen.
El tema de la minería en este país es grave. El 13% del territorio mexicano está concesionado a mineras, en su mayoría canadienses, y no gobernamos nosotros ahí, no somos los dueños de esta tierra, sino son de las minerías. Y si tomamos en cuenta el territorio también que controla el narcotráfico, en realidad estamos tan fragmentados que además el discurso oficial ha sido que no quieren balcanizar este país por lo que nosotros hemos pedido respecto a nuestra autonomía y autodeterminación como pueblos indígenas. Sin embargo, las minerías y el narcotráfico están haciendo lo propio y estamos en un país balcanizado por ellos y el gobierno no ha rendido cuentas al respecto.
Pedro is referring to the fact that mining is a big issue in Mexico because about 13% of the Mexican territory is given away to mining companies, especially companies coming from Canada. The indigenous groups in Mexico have demanded to have a certain autonomy over their territories. However, the response of the government is that they do not want to divide, to balkanize, to divide the territory so that different groups have autonomy in different places. But Pedro is saying that this is already happening, not towards indigenous people, but with narco-traffickers who are almost owning territories and mining companies.
Yo creo que el problema es de información o desinformación, porque la gran mayoría de los mexicanos tiene una información oficial, pero no les ha llegado la información real que tenemos aquí abajo y que nosotros partimos de que si no hay una información completa, no se puede tomar una buena decisión. Muchas veces nos han criticado y nos han descalificado porque la única versión que circula en la mayoría del país es la del gobierno, un gobierno que presume de tener 30 millones de votos como nunca otro gobierno lo ha tenido. El peso de eso es fuerte y nos ha cancelado la posibilidad de tener mayor apoyo del resto del país. Gracias.
Pedro says that he thinks the main challenge there is the misinformation that a lot of Mexican people that do not belong to ethnic communities or communities who are struggling have. Pedro thinks that the official information that the government gives the people is very different from the actual things that happen in the territory. They are often disqualified by the official information, where they are, as he said before, treated as underaged or less capable. And he thinks that, what needs to happen really is that the people can really hear the indigenous stories. He talked about the fact that the current president says that he had 30 million votes, which means that he had a really big support. So it's very difficult to go against what the president right now wants, because he claims a lot of big social support in Mexico. However, this is not really kind of in the favor of the indigenous people.
Well, that was our Q&A section. If you want to support the indigenous communities in Mexico, you can become a member of Oxfam IBIS here in Denmark. And if you have questions regarding this, just write to Anya in the chat. We want to thank you a lot for joining us this time, for participating, and for showing your support to the leaders like Pedro and to the community, the indigenous community in Mexico. Esperamos que tengas una buena tarde, Pedro, Doris y todos los que están en México. Y una vez más, gracias por acompañarnos y por compartir su historia con nosotros. Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Muy amable.